everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chriselle Counseling's Hope Through the Journey podcast. Life is a challenge, and here we're providing hope through your journey of life. We'll help guide you in creating the life balance you're looking for. This podcast is all about destigmatizing mental health by talking about it in a way that we can all understand. I'm Alfred Chriselle Jr., joining you along for this ride. I'm joined today by my co-host, fellow licensed professional counselor, and my sister, Lettie Chriselle. You know, Lettie, as we record today's show, we're right smack in the middle of the dog days of summer. So what's new for you, Lettie? Are you getting some summer self-care in?
Oh, let me tell you, I sure am. I am all about the summer self-care. This past weekend, I had an opportunity to go out to the island, catch up with some friends. We were able to hang out, reconnect a little bit.
Sounds like
fun in the sun. It was a great quality time. Yeah. Later this month, I'm going to be visiting our sister, Linda, and get to hang out with her. But what about you, Al? What have you been up to this summer?
Well, not a whole lot. I've been busy with work.
You're always so busy.
So we did take some time to just relax a little bit, and we took our little one and the girls to a big old water park here in Texas, and so we got to do that for a couple of days. And a lot of fun. It was a good time there. Yeah, but most of all, just kind of relaxing.
A little bit of staycation.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Well, all this thinking about, the trips and all of this stuff, I started thinking about other people in my life, like what I call my ride or dies, or like, your tribe, and how important family and friends are to me. Mm-hmm. I value those relationships so much. And then I started thinking about what else in my life I value. I tend to spiral a little when I jump from one thought to another,
Don't we all?
So what I'm trying to say is, Al, join me on this spiral. Let's talk about values. Like, what are they? Why are they important to us? And how do they shape us?
All right. I'll join you on this spiral.
Right. Appreciate that.
Because values are something worth talking about. We tend to not think about them at all until we do. But if you ask someone the question, what do you value? What do you really value? It's been my experience, at least, that some people struggle with naming those. Right. And values are a really big deal. They guide us in responding in ways that define the person we say we are and the person we want to become. But let's slow down a bit here, lad. Let's start at the beginning. The first question you asked is, what are values? And you know me in definitions, lad. So.
Yes, I do. It has become something I can count on. Ask Al, and he'll find the definition.
And I did. So in this case, I'm going to refer to a definition of values as viewed through the lens of acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, in which Let,
yes,
is a therapeutic modality that we espouse because of its effectiveness with treatment, and I'm all in on ACT.
And we've talked about it a little bit before. We've touched on it on other podcasts. So.
We have, and if you've been listening to us for a while or are a subscriber to our blog, you're familiar with our alignment with ACT and its many interventions. And so, but getting back to the original question, what are values? ACT defines values as our heart's deepest desires, how we want to be, what we want to stand for, and how we want to relate to the world around us. Mm-hmm. Further, it states that values are leading principles that can guide us and motivate us as we go dancing through life. Any Wicked fans out there?
I'm sure we've got a handful.
Seriously, though, I think this is the power of values. But for a lot of us, we rarely have an opportunity to sit down and think about our values and the force they can have in our lives.
Well explained, as always, Al. I think we first need to ask ourselves, what are my deepest desires? What do I really care about? And once we have those answers, then we can identify or focus in on primary values, right? I know that when I discuss with clients, the hardest part is sometimes right at the beginning, the actual identification of those values.
It is.
And there are different ways to approach clarifying the values or identifying the values.
Yeah, right. We've got to first, like you said, we've got to first identify what our values are. But where do we start? Again, referencing ACT, there's an activity that comes out of that modality that can clear up for people what their values are and really could be the starting point that we've been talking about here. So in my work with individuals in utilizing ACT, I'll typically incorporate an ACT values card sort activity. It's an intervention that can help determine a baseline with regard to values. So let me explain a little bit about how this works.
Great.
It's an interactive activity that you do on any device. And there is a list of about 40 of the most common values. And you're asked to read the definition of each one of the values and place them in one of 3 columns. The 3 columns are very important, important, and not important. And then once they do that, we'll streamline the list a bit and look at the values that they placed in the very important column and challenge them to select top 5, gotta have them, non-negotiable, this is me values, and look really hard at them.
Yeah.
Now, I really do appreciate this activity because it makes you stop and take a real hard look at what is most important to you at that moment. And I've found that once someone completes this activity, it's very effective in either confirming values that you already knew to be true about yourself, or it ignites something more powerful and starts to give direction and focus, which, as we know, can be incredibly motivating and meaningful.
I love that activity. It can be so, like you said, it can be so empowering because values are going to be different for everyone, and there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Once you can identify your own personal values, you can then continue the process of designing your life to be better aligned with your true self, or as I like to say, your authentic self. And taking that activity a step further, for each of those values, depending on the client, I might say like 3 to 5 values, depending on, don't want to overwhelm them,
Right.
So what I have them do is write down 3 actions that define what it would look like to live those values. For example, if you value health, 3 actions might be daily walks, increase in water intake, and mindful eating. Yeah. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Throwback to a previous podcast, mindful eating. Yep.
Episode 11. In case you're wondering. Okay. So let's tackle the next question, Let. And the next one you asked, which is, why are values so important to us? And I want to hear your thoughts on this. But for the short of it, for me, is that values are important to us because they determine for us the person that we want to be.
Right.
And once I've figured out what values are most important to me, then I'm saying to myself and to the people around me that this is the kind of person I am. This is the person that I want to be. Again, primarily for me. And if I'm someone who values things like caring and loving, for example, then when situations come up in life, opportunities, I like to call them, when these opportunities come up, whether it's a conversation, a conflict, any interaction with anyone, then I have to ask the question to myself, who do I want to be at this moment, right now? The response I'm about to choose is going to be determined by what it is that I value. So if I value being caring and loving, then my response will reflect that.
Agreed.
Right?
Yes, values are the most important resource that I have, and they are within my control.
Yeah.
They can get me through hard times, make me aware of my blessings, and inform the decisions that I make. For me, values are grounding. They set the course of my life so that when I'm feeling off, I take a step back and ask myself, why didn't that feel right?
Yeah.
Was I being authentic in that moment?
Good point. You know, a great example of why values are so important is evidenced by Viktor Frankl's story about his time at Auschwitz. Auschwitz is a horrific Jewish concentration camp in Germany during the Holocaust. But Viktor Frankl is another person that I really talk about a lot because his story is just overwhelming. He was an Austrian psychiatrist, a survivor of the Holocaust at Auschwitz, and he wrote an inspiring book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, you need to. It's a great book and a true depiction of the importance of values. In Russ Harris's book, The Happiness Trap, he references Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. And what he found was that prisoners who were able to connect with their values created something to live for, while those that couldn't find a connection with something to value lost their will to live. And again, just a great example of the importance of values for us in our lives.
All right. So we need to take care of our values. They need exercise and nourishment just like our minds and bodies do. So it does take work. The same time that we spend on our minds and bodies, we need to spend on our values, kind of like cultivating the values, right? Evaluate my actions and consider the impact that they have on me and on others. What are the consequences? Going for a walk, for example, instead of sitting on the couch watching TV, because that's going to improve my health, which is one of my values.
Right.
But also celebrating my accomplishments to reinforce good habits that align with my values. When I feel like I'm not being true to myself, I need to observe my thoughts and catch myself when I might be off track. I need a reset, right? I need to develop the willingness to change my ways.
Yeah, and when you say that, I'm thinking about, again, another book, Atomic Habits of James Clear, right? And it's the idea of focusing on the process.
Right.
If I have a goal to lose 10 pounds, for example, well, the goal is fine, but what happens after the goal?
Right.
What next, right? But with a value, and he calls a process, to be focused on the process of living a healthy lifestyle, then the goal comes. But you keep going on. In other words, it's because it's what you value.
Right.
The process becomes the most important thing, not so much the goal. And I want to make sure to note here that values change throughout our lifespan. So values that we have in adulthood are very different from those that we may have had as adolescents.
Well, and it's almost like they should change.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's...
Well, from a developmental point of view, they would change. And that's okay. Values are neither right nor wrong. Like you said earlier, they simply are what is most important to you.
In that moment, in that time of your life, right? And it's definitely okay. And not only is it okay and part of our journey in life, because changes do happen, but it's also okay that we all have different values.
Yeah.
Just because our primary values may be different from friends or even family members, everyone is going through their own beautiful journey at their own pace.
And going back to reference the activity, just because you put something in not important doesn't mean you don't value it. It's just not at the top of your list.
Right, exactly. And you know what? It reminds me, when I've done checklists before, right, with clients, number from 1 to 10, but there's more than 10 on the list, right?
Right.
So a couple of times I got it back and we're going to discuss it, and they've put a 1 on 4 or 5 different values and then a 2 on I'm like, okay, wait, reteach here, because we're not saying that they're not important, but in that moment in your life, these are your values. What you're aligned with.
Right. Let's throw another wrench into this. If we look at the definitions of different values, for most of them, it says to myself and others. In other words, you have to treat yourself in ways you value as well as towards others.
Right.
And when people hear this, it's kind of like, wait, hold on a sec. You mean I have to be loving to myself too? If that is what you say you value, then yes, you are loving to yourself and others. Caring for yourself and others.
Well, you know what? And that also reminds me, it goes back to, I have conversations and it's like, would you tell a friend that? You say something about yourself.
Right.
And it's like, would you tell a friend that? Well, no, I wouldn't want to, hurt someone's intentionally hurt someone. So it's like, okay, look back at yourself. Why do you do that to yourself?
Yeah. It really throws people because we're always thinking about others and others and others, but we fail to reciprocate that on ourselves. And that's important when we talk about values. They're so important to our emotional well-being. But again, we've got to know what it is that we value first before we can begin to act in that way. And like you stated at the outset of our podcast today, that you know what it is that you value. And that makes it easier for you to respond in the way that you do.
Right.
That's why you make the decisions that you make. That's why you make a conscious effort to be the person that you want to be, guided by your values.
I think it's so important to take time, again, for self-reflection. When we say that a lot, I know sometimes we're afraid to sit in the quiet with ourselves, but only when we take that time can we really ask ourselves the tough questions. Are my values clear to me and to those around me? If not, there's work to be done. And now you know what you need to do to get started.
Yeah.
Develop the willingness to change by adjusting my values or do a better job of living up to what I do believe. If the answer is yes, fantastic. Continue to cultivate those values that guide your daily choices.
Right.
And speaking of cultivating our values, Al, I believe you have another activity to share with us.
Well, yes, I do.
Oh,
and the reason I do.
how did I know?
The reason I do is because it's important for us to share with our audience some actionable steps to be able to do right away and put this thing in process. Because like we talked about earlier, people don't think about values as much as we should. But like we talked about, they are a guiding force in
and
being
as
who we
you
are.
say, and as part of the intro to the podcast all the time, it's about finding that balance. Sometimes
That's right.
we don't know that there's an imbalance until we
Yeah,
start the
right.
reflection and like, oh, these are ways to make it better, that I do have that balance.
Right. So if this whole values thing has got you a little concerned and you're looking for a way to clarify your values, I want to share a great exercise that comes from the aforementioned Happiness Trap book. It's called Imagine You're 80 Years Old. So it helps to have a piece of paper and pen while you're doing this. It goes something like this. Imagine you're 80 years old and you're looking back on life as it is today. Then fill in the blank to the following sentence starters. The first one is, I spent too much time worrying about...
Dot.
Fill in the blank. And then you would complete that sentence. And then the next one is, I spent too little time doing things such as...
Dot.
Fill in the blank. The last sentence starter is, if I could go back in time, then what I would do differently from today onward is...
Dot.
Yeah. Try that exercise and see what happens. I imagine it might start the values conversation inside you a bit more, and that's a good thing.
Yikes! It's already started. I guess I better do that exercise real soon. I'm running out of time. I gotta go fill that out.
We'll do that right after this podcast. But this enlightening result that comes from this, I think, answers the last question that you had, Let, because our values shape the person we want to become, the person we are trying to discover, our best self, the best person we can be. This is what it's all about. The journey that is our life. Look, we can only control 3 things: what we say, what we do, and what we think about a situation.
And that's already a lot to control.
That's it.
That's already a lot to be worried about.
But it's a powerful thing if you think about it.
Right.
And let me be the best in what I say, do, and think, and let my values guide me, because that's what's going to give me peace of mind. That's when I know that I'm there.
Think of it this way. Your values are your why, and the actions you take are the way you live your life. Here comes an aha moment.
All right, let's hear it.
Finding your why guides you in finding your way. The journey is so worth it. Be mindful and intentional in your continued self-reflection and self-discovery. I know I try to do that myself every day.
Yeah, and you have to stay focused on it. You can't let it slide. You can't stop thinking about it. Again, it's like everything else. You get good at what you practice. And so what are we practicing? Where are we spending our time? That's important. And that's going to put an exclamation mark on today's podcast and bring it to an end. And we want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you were able to discover something new about the importance of values in today's podcast. If you enjoyed the show and liked what you heard, please submit a review to let others know all about what we're doing here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And as I alluded to earlier in the podcast, we've got a blog that you can sign up for if you'd like to hear more from Chriselle Counseling. Just head on over to our website at ChriselleCounseling.com. That's CRIXELL counseling.com, and become one of our loyal subscribers. We love you all, and we appreciate you. If social media is your thing, you can follow me on Instagram at ChriselleJr.Alfred. Where can the audience follow you on social media?
They can find me on Instagram at Anna Chriselle. And let me just say, I know that it's not important the number of followers you have, but I'm kind of trying to build up my number of followers. So help me out, people. Help me out. Once again, thank you for taking time to listen to our podcast. Remember, Practice makes permanent.
Self-esteem, episode 4. Thank you, Lev, for sharing a little bit of you on the podcast today. Life is a journey, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to share a little piece of our life with you. Remember, you're not alone. We're in this together. We got this. Talk soon.
Goodbye.